Welcome to the Let's Talk About Church Safety and Security podcast, where we discuss the issues churches face protecting their flock while maintaining a Christ-centered focus, with your host, Paul Buckner.
So, this is going to be a fun interview. If you don't know, I'm Paul Buckner. I am the host of the Let's Talk About Church Safety and Security podcast. And today I've got a special guest. I've got my friend John Riley with General Response. And I want to say before I go in, the reason I've called season 1 the Gratitude Tour is a chance to say thank you to people that have influenced how I think, mindset, and what I do. Folks that it may be something they've walked me through, or things that I've learned from them, experiences I've had with them that may be even outside the scope of church safety and security, but they've impacted things that directly influence that. So John is one of those guys. Without further ado, I'm going to bring him in.
Hey.
Morning, sir.
Good morning. Good morning.
So do me a favor, tell me a little bit about your background, and then we'll go into what brought about General Response.
Originally from around the world. My dad was with the Foreign Service, or with the government, so I grew up around the world. Finally moved back to Virginia in the early 80s, long enough to graduate high school there. And while I was in high school, got my pilot's license. And that's all I ever really wanted to do as a kid. Ended up going into the Army for 7 years, was an infantry grunt, went through Desert Storm. And as I was getting out, interestingly enough, instead of doing something, aviation related, became a police officer here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and did that for 20 years. Retired in 2015. And in that time, actually, I prepared a post-retirement career. I was literally had a job waiting for me as a charter pilot at a nearby airport here. And then I got this calling to create what ultimately became Gentle Response. And here I am 6 years later. Yesterday was the 6-year anniversary of my very first de-escalation class that I gave at my church. It was about 45 minutes long. And today I've got a team of incredibly talented, motivated people. We travel the country. It's a 4.5 hour, 5 hour training seminar, very dynamic, very realistic. And the Lord continues to bless me. We teach corporations and businesses, but my heart remains with teaching church personnel how to more effectively handle a situation.
I love it. See, what I have found, and for those that are watching it and listening to this, I have found that you never really know something until it's tested. And so if you're on the range and you're a military man, you're law enforcement, you got that very strong background, you never really know a topic until it's tested. And I have found myself in situations where I had read verbal judo. I had gone through some classes with it. It's a great legacy thing. And I will say from my personal experience, just what I've been learning from you, and I've been blessed to have conversations with you on and off camera, and to meet you in person, and to become friends, which I really enjoy. And that is just these conversations that I've had with you have leveled up my de-escalation game. And I recently had a pastor friend. I was passing on your name and number to him, and he looked down at that and he said he's the guy that has been helping you. And I said, yes. And he goes, I've seen that in action. I've seen you de-escalate. And so just from it leaching into me, I haven't even been able to get into that hands-on environment with you. But when you're doing defensive tactics with a rubber knife, the not so soft rubber knife, you never really, you can think you're Kung Fu Panda until you're in that situation, or until you have to move and shoot, or you're in a force-on-force training with airsoft or paintball or whatever, or stimulations. I've had guys go, man, I've got this, I've got this on lockdown, and then they charge into that classroom during that active shooter training. You get turned to Swiss cheese and come out and go, I think my tactics might need some work. And that's what I love about what you bring with your military background, and especially your law enforcement background. You know that hands-on, adrenaline popping is what's gonna make it stick, and you're really gonna learn it. And you know this. I've been in enough situations where I've pulled up as a chaplain with an officer to enough verbal or physical domestics or whatever to know that you've got to be able to remain calm and stay in control in an environment where no one else is calm or in control. And when someone's screaming at you, your adrenaline starts to ramp. And that's what I love about what you bring to the table, and you're doing it into churches. So, and in this market, and then I'm going to throw it back to you, in this current climate, a lot of the people that are looking for a payday, and so they want to sue your church, and they want to make you blow your stack and call them a name or shove them in church, and they're looking for a payday. They are realizing that corporate America and municipal America is starting to train their people how to handle those folks, and so how to deflect those conversations and not take things personally, and to de-escalate. So now, unfortunately, the paycheck looking people that want to sue your church and see you as a soft target, they're now shifting their focus over into churches. And I don't think there's ever been a time in our culture that we've needed what you do more. So how's that for a setup?
That is awesome. That's exactly why I created the training program the way I did. It's specifically designed to help someone develop stress inoculation, muscle memory, self-confidence, and confidence with their colleagues. Because I know from experience and observation, the longer you are in a stressful confrontational situation by yourself, the higher the probability you may end up being the one that say or do something escalated, because you're going to get frustrated, impatient, whatever with the situation you're in. We're human. We all have a trigger line at some point. Some people have longer fuses than others, but this is why teamwork is so critical. And coincidentally, just to touch upon a point you made, coincidentally, yesterday, I had a wonderful conversation with one of the students of a training seminar my team and I just had this past Saturday. And she was saying, "Hey, John, to be honest with you, I was not looking forward to going to training." And I said, "Well, why? What did you think we were going to do?" And she goes, "Number one, I was not interested in sitting through another lecture presentation. I just did not want someone to talk to me." And then she said, once she got there, and then she said, "But you were so engaging right off the bat." And I appreciate that, because maybe you have too. I have been in lecture presentations where within moments,
Yeah, death by PowerPoint. Yes.
It doesn't matter how much knowledge the speaker has. If he doesn't connect with you, it's a
Yes.
waste of time, money, effort, right? But she said, "John, you're very engaging." And then she said, when I realized there was going to be scenarios, I didn't want to be there again, because I do not like confrontation. I do not like role playing. But she says, this is so critical. Once we started getting into it, I realized, and she said so many other things, and I even asked her. I said, "Hey, will you repeat some of that on video so I can post it
Yeah.
on my social media?" And she goes, "No," but I kind of paraphrased what she said and posted some stuff on my Instagram and all that. But she went on to say that it was so critical, because she realized that as much as her heart was racing and the anxiety she felt, she realized, as she was learning things from the different scenarios she went through, she realized this is a safe place to make these mistakes, because
Yes.
in real life, she's going to need to be able to work through that anxiety and stress she feels, and be able to make sure she doesn't say or do something that escalates the situation. And I said, that's exactly why I do what I do, because
Amen.
she even pointed out, I realized I would not have learned this stuff from just sitting in a chair watching someone talk at me. And I
Yeah.
said, thank you. That's all I'm trying to do is kind of raise the training to a little bit different level. I keep it simple, because I've seen some other de-escalation training out there. It's 2-3 days worth. And it's a lot of scientific knowledge. Well, your limbic system in your brain is going to do this, and your adrenaline is going to do that, and you're going to feel pins and needles. It's a lot of stuff that, from my own personal observation, I want to keep it simple, keep it to the point. What can you say or do right now in the moment to begin the de-escalation process? And I pass on to people also, you need to also understand that despite what you see or hear on social media and the media, there is no such thing as one thing that you can say or do that would just de-escalate someone. It
Right.
takes time. It takes time. I tell my classes, take a moment and think about the last time you were just mad.
Yes.
Now think of something that someone could have said or done that would have just de-escalated you.
Yeah.
No such thing. It takes time for you or anybody to come down from that emotional spike. And I tell people there will be certain circumstances where nothing you say or do will make a difference. Level of intensity of their anger, if you're engaging them at when they're really at their peak. Um, Mental and cognitive disabilities, emotional stuff, level of intoxication, alcohol, drugs, or all the
Yeah.
above, and or if they have an agenda. And you're going to find more of that, just like you were saying. People will come to church with an agenda to create a situation just so they can be on YouTube.
Yeah.
And I tell them, successful de-escalation is not everyone high-fiving each other, sitting down singing kumbaya, and Facebook friending each other later.
Right.
Successful de-escalation is that other person walks away, even if they're still mad, but you get to go home safe in one piece, and hopefully property is not damaged. But if property is damaged, you've got insurance for that.
Amen.
But I have seen, and this is where part of my training is to try to get people to understand, when you see someone start breaking windows, throwing chairs and all that, that is not an excuse for you to suddenly go hands on. You need to be careful that you don't put yourself and the church in liability, because I am so aware of several situations where people suddenly feel like I have to do something because they're becoming violent to property. And unfortunately, they go hands on, and now they're being sued. The church is being sued because the courts and me, I'm looking at it going, okay, so he was breaking up a TV, and he wasn't hurting anyone. He or she wasn't hurting anyone. They weren't hurting you. They were just venting and being loud, rude, obnoxious to an inanimate object, which I'm sure you have insurance for. But you initiated physical contact. So of course they defended themselves by throwing a chair at you. You know, and I'm aware of several incidences in the West Michigan area, high profile. They made the news, local news here over the last couple of years, and they were escalated by church personnel.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, you make several great points there. This is what I love about this: the conversations that I can have with people who have the experience and have the knowledge. And my journey is as a student who's never going to know it all. Dan Blevins, I love how he says, "You'll never hear me say that I've arrived. I'm always learning," and I love that. I know Dan; he's a good man.
Yep.
And so several things you said I thought were great gold nuggets. A lot of times I think we have the wrong mental picture of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about that before we started the broadcast. We have this mental picture of ourselves. And I remember a man saying in a church safety group, and I don't remember which one, so I'm remiss on that, but he was in one of the church safety groups that I've been a part of, and he made a comment that there were people going around defacing statues, and he said I would shoot somebody for that if they did that at my church. And I was like, well, brother, I love you, but first off, unless you're in a very specific number of states under a very specific number of criteria, you can't shoot somebody over property. You literally will go to prison over that, and you're actually opening your church up to liability and embarrassment. And to me, one huge aspect that I think we overlook in the safety, in the church safety space, as I've come to call it, is we overlook preventing our church from being embarrassed, publicly embarrassed. We don't want to be in the news for the wrong reasons. And I don't mean hide the sin. I mean prevent the incident. And then number two, I think going back to mindset, if we have this wrong mindset and we go into, and let's say we shoot that guy that defaced that statue or threw a chair at the 50-inch TV, now that lawsuit is ongoing, we've allowed public embarrassment to our church. That person is now suing the church, and I've seen ministries hampered, slowed down, delayed, or even prevented from doing ministry, expanding the church, going on that mission trip. Their bus ministry got shut down, whatever, because of a lawsuit. Now they're paying somebody out who didn't deserve a payday because they came in and caused it, but now you're paying out to them. And so I think those are aspects of church safety that we overlook. And then we just have to be able to take a step back. And this is what you do so well in that situation, and go, first off, prayerfully, how do I de-escalate? Lord, I'd like to phone a friend. What do I do to help this to subside? And maybe it's just form a cordon and keep a safe distance and not let people rush in there and let law enforcement come in and arrest this person and haul them out. And so those are two aspects, I think, a lot of times is what is our mental mindset? And I want to throw that to you as we go into this. Are we prayerfully looking at this? And then two, we may not be able to de-escalate that person. All we may be able to do is establish self-control over ourselves and our team and keep a minimum safe distance.
Ministry mindset. That is my mantra for 2022 moving forward. I am harping on that. Ministry mindset, ministry mindset. You can still be safety, security, and be ministry mindset without being a jerk about it, because I have seen and observed that, again, one of the first thing that goes out the window when people perceive that they have to now go into the role of tough guy or whatever, they think they need to be in this tough guy role, ministry mindset goes out the window. And I'm trying to get people to remember, you are in a church that for thousands of years has been a light of beacon for broken people.
Amen.
Long after we are gone, it will continue to be a light of beacon. The trick is that while we're here on our watch, we don't want people to get hurt, okay? And preferably a property not damaged. However, you need to expect broken people to come through your doors. And oftentimes they will look like a DLR that don't look right. For those who are watching this and don't understand DLR, don't look right. Someone who kind of catches your attention, that doesn't look right. That doesn't mean they're an active shooter. It does not mean they are a suicide bomber. That does not mean they're up to no good. It just very probably means they're finally got to the point where they want to set foot inside a church and look for God, and your smile or lack thereof is going to be that one deciding moment whether or not they continue to walk in here and find God, or walk out and either go back down a path of self-destruction or find another church.
Yeah.
You know, I buddy of mine was one of the stories I shared, just an example of ministry mindset. Good people, and this is why I think there's such a need in churches, good people meaning well, but don't appreciate and don't recognize that they say and do things that can escalate a situation and turn people away. A number of years ago, a buddy of mine, Sunday morning after a 12-hour Saturday night shift, he's on his way back home. It's about a 30-minute drive, 40-minute drive to get back home. Wife's already at church. He's running late. He's tired, frustrated, hungry, blah, blah, blah. He gets there. Small church, parking lot's full though. He admittedly just finally found a spot in the grass. As he's getting out, he hears a voice call out to him, "You can't park there." My buddy turns around, he sees one of the church volunteer parking lot attendants walking up to him. My buddy says, "Hey, I'm having trouble finding a place to park." And the individual made a comment, something along the lines of, "I don't know, but you can't park there." And in a flash, my buddy said, I felt so angry, so upset. I just wanted to leave. And had my wife not been there already, I would have just left. And he goes, "John, I get it. I can't park there." What upset me was the way he was talking to me and the way he was approaching me, the body language. He said, "Where was the ministry mindset?" Well, he didn't use those words. I came up with that later, but he goes, where was that friendly greeting? "Hey, good morning, sir. Welcome to church. I'm sorry you can't park right there, but if you come with me, I'll help you find a spot."
Amen.
But instead of that, there was this, and he technically wasn't wrong. It was his delivery. It was how he came across, and it did not come ministry minded. It wasn't a friendly smile, the welcome to church. And because you are a church representative, where was the offer to help you find a place? And literally in 4 to 5 seconds, how many times have people at our churches inadvertently turned people away? Because I've heard very similar stories like that over and over again. And even at my own church, and I know we have good people, but they just don't realize that how they come across is a turnoff. And so you've got to always be telling yourself, ministry mindset, ministry mindset.
This is what I love about this, because there's so many different directions this can go. And so let's stay in the parking lot for a minute, because one of the ladies, she's my volunteer coordinator at church. She's my boss. So I call her boss.
Yeah.
And she herds about 400 volunteers. So it's like herding cats. And sometimes as church people, we're hard to deal with. And, it's just it's one of those things that happens.
What?
And so we had an event, and she was speaking about how crucially important the first impression people have of your church is. And so I'm going to bring this back around to what you're talking about, because the parking lot is where it all starts. So your security presence should start in your parking lot. 100% of the threats that come against your church of an armed nature have to come in through the outside at some point, unless they tunnel up through the ground,
Right.
and they parachute in from an airplane. And so if you're out there eyes and ears and you're waving and you see things, you can interact with people. Their physical domestics can start in the parking lot, all those things. Having de-escalation training, even for your parking lot team, or just that ministry mindset, is huge. And so she pointed out one of my volunteers, and I was not there for it, unfortunately. And she said, I want to let you know, you were the very first person when I was coming to this church with my husband, and we were looking at joining the ministry team, and he sings in our worship, on our worship team and what have you. And she said, when we were looking at joining staff, I was nervous. She said, I grew up in church. I've been in church my entire life. Here I'm coming to a new church, and a guy waves at me, points and waves, and good morning. And she said, my kids went, wow, these guys are friendly. And she said, my little children picked up on this. And she said, it made me feel a lot more comfortable that if they're that friendly this far out, what is it going to be like inside? And we've had people stop us in the parking lot and say, I don't know how many times I've pulled in and you've brightened my day just by now. I'm a nut, and I might happen to dance sometimes in the parking lot when I'm directing traffic. And if I see somebody with a scowl on my face, I might. Because I'm a nut, and I understand that if you can get somebody to laugh, you can often totally improve their demeanor. So then you were talking about de-escalating somebody with a parking situation. I'm a firm believer that you win 100% of the fights you don't have to fight. And I have friends that I chaplain. For those that don't know, I'm a civilian police chaplain, that like they can't feel this half of their hand because of a fight 20 years ago with a guy who got out on bail the next day. And they're like, man, I whooped the fire out of that guy, and he whooped the fire out of me, and I bear the marks of it for the rest of my life. Well, in this case, no pain, no pain. And so if we can lovingly de-escalate a situation, and I've got two thoughts on that, I want to throw it back to you, but we had a crowded Sunday morning, and we have a very wide walkway that goes from one side of the parking lot right up to the building. And a lady pulled up into that spot and was completely blocking an area that in case of an emergency, people have to leave through. And I come up and I said, hey, I know parking's tight. I've got a spot down here. I've radioed somebody. I can get you into it. I said, but I really need to keep that open. I apologize. Now, I could have come up to her and gone, you can't park there, because the training I have is fire lane. That's not safe. What are you thinking? But which I could have come up to her completely incredulous and slinging spittle as I frothed and yelled at her and looked like a bulldog or something. Or I could come up and say, hey, I apologize. I've got a spot down here for you. And I had a situation with real world de-escalation, and then I'm gonna throw it back to you, where I was at an event. I'm a geek. I'm a nerd. We used to do these things called LAN parties, and everybody got together and you hooked your computers up and you played these games and you shot each other, and it was a blast, or you built empires. Well, it was many years ago, and a guy came over. He'd had a beer. I'm with the not drinking part of the crowd. He's with the drinking part of the crowd. And we're on private property, and he looks around, and I'm the biggest guy there. Well, I'm 6'4" and about 220, but he was like a gorilla. And I mean, he was probably 80 pounds heavier than me. And he comes over to me, and he goes, what would you say if I told you I was going to drag you outside and beat you until you cried like a little girl? And I looked him down and up, and I said, I'd say you could probably get it done. And I'm thinking, this is going to hurt. And he looked at me and he goes, I like you. And so we went outside and sat on the curb, and I kid you not, we talked about God for 2 hours.
Outstanding. That's ministry minded.
I didn't have to look at this guy and go, I'll be back with an Uzi and a Buick. I didn't.
Right.
And so I want to throw that back to you, because I love what you said about ministry does start in the parking lot, and then let's slowly work our way inside.
That is so true. It's how you react or respond to a veiled threat, confrontation, antagonistic comment, waiting to see how you're going to react or respond. They'll set it off in one of two ways. And you did exactly right. Don't take it personally. You already knew the guy was probably drinking. He's just shooting off at the mouth, right? There's no reason to assume that he is specifically targeting you. He's just shooting off at the mouth. Fortunately, he came to you and not someone else who suddenly, oh, I'm going to let you know, yeah, you don't talk to me that way. I don't care how big you are. You're going to know you got into a fight.
Yeah.
There's a time to have that attitude. I've taken on people much bigger than me. That's the attitude I had to have. But not every, and this is one thing I pass on to my law enforcement classes, not every situation you encounter requires that type of mindset thinking. Yeah, yes, be prepared, but that initial response and reaction does not require you to suddenly let someone know I'm in charge here. I'm the law here. Back to your parking lot, I made a little video. Coincidentally, this past September, there was an incident at my church parking lot and an incident at another church parking lot with whom we had done training. I did a comparison. It's called The Tale of Two Parking Lots on my YouTube channel, but basically it was phenomenally handled by our guys with an individual who was screaming at people walking into church one Sunday morning, telling them that the world's going to end on December 31st. They're following a false prophet, that he is actually Jesus Christ, and just well done. Because I tell people, when you're walking up to a situation, you need to be assessing it. Loud, rude, angry person, sounds like he's got mental issues. Boom. Knowing that this person has mental issues should now help you decide, how do I approach this person without saying or doing something that make him spin really that much more out of control? Maintaining your distance. I mean, it was well handled. 2-3 other security guys came up, recognized that guy number one had everything under control because he had called that on the radio. So when they came up and saw on scene that he was talking to them, and there wasn't any evidence that it was spiraling out of control, they stayed back. Because I tell people, there's no reason to get all sucked into the situation where we're all now crowding around somebody, because that can be an antagonistic. Exactly. And you can have someone who's already upset lash out with fear aggression. So they stayed back, and it worked itself out. One of the guys came up to me and said, yeah, John, I got to be honest with you. The entire time my brain was racing on, how do I just get this guy to go? What can I say or do to just get him to go? And so my lesson point there is, don't rush things. Let it work itself out. The moment you start trying to rush things, I just need to get this crazy guy off our parking lot. Well, you start thinking about rushing it, you're going to give yourself anxiety, you're going to give yourself impatience, you're going to get frustrated because you just want him to go. And then you are liable to say or do something that could escalate it, when you could just be quiet, let him vent, which is exactly what happened. They just let him talk crap. The one primary guy maintained contact. And there's another thing that we try to get people to understand. Don't have 3-4 people talking over themselves at somebody. Let one person be the primary. The guy worked itself out, and then he drove away. And I said, I'm so glad you maintained that self-discipline and didn't feel like you had to say something. Well, thank you for coming, but you need to go, or anything like that, because that sounds very dismissive. It sounds like rejection. And for someone who may have already had issues with the church, this is one more example from your church that I'm being rejected, I'm being dismissed, I'm not being taken seriously. And you got to create a situation where this guy comes back and is now an active shooter. So again, you're absolutely right. You win 100% of the situations that you don't create, escalate, or partake in.
I love where you took that, because I have a real life thing that happened. There's a young man that I met. He introduced me to his friend, and they knew cops. They had worked alongside them, but not law enforcement. And they told me, before they gave their lives to the Lord, they'd both come up rough, some really bad things that happened. And this will make your blood run cold. They had developed a homicide pact. And I said, what is a homicide pact? I'd never heard of anything like that. He said, well, you've heard of a suicide pact? And I said, yes. He said, we had decided it was, and I'm paraphrasing, it was basically us against the world. And so if one of us ever wanted to go off the reservation and just go on the warpath and start stacking bodies, the other one was going with him. And that just gave me pause. Yeah. And so they walk with the Lord. They're in a good place. And I think that you just don't know what someone's going through. It's a cliche, but they talk about always treat somebody with respect because you don't know what they're going through, what their pain is. We will never know this side of heaven. And I think honestly, when we get to heaven, we're not going to care, but we're never going to know this side of heaven how many times we by our smile, by our love, by your love will they know you've been with me. It might be scripture, you know what I
Yep.
mean? And so we're never going to know this side of heaven how many times we shut something down. It never happened because of how we loved.
Yep.
And you were talking about like creating space and letting somebody vent. We had a situation at my church where a guy came in and some mental instability. I pinged him in the parking lot. And you know this from your law enforcement background. A lot of times you can look at a person's vehicle and it's weird, and it's almost like there's a halo around it. You can kind of, oh, and you can kind of tell. And I joke that sometimes I think the car's been on methamphetamine too because of what people do to their cars. Well, there was something about this guy's car, and I know that was the Holy Spirit. I pray for protection. I pray for discernment. And I saw the guy come inside, and he had a little bag with him. And so I'm pinging him. I'm talking to my guys. We're lovingly having conversations with him. Well, he was like a hyper environmentalist. And so take personal pain, take mental instability, take probably some prescription medication, lots of anxiety. The world is going to end. It's going to fall apart because you're cutting down trees. And okay, that's a great viewpoint. I understand where you're coming from, but then he starts getting angry, and he would suddenly become violently angry. And I was able to position him where I had a large table between the pastor he was talking to and him. I set my cup of coffee down next to my pastor to give a liquid. But if you have to throw something at somebody, by the way, I can't block a liquid you throw at me. It will get me. And so I sat down, I took the lid off, I set a hot cup of coffee down. We were all about de-escalation. We were letting him listen and take the pressure off the pressure cooker. So he got his say. People wisely moved around us and let him in our large foyer have his say. I was on one side of the table. A flanking position was another gentleman, and we kept our posture relaxed. And we were talking and letting this guy. We just listened and let him talk to our pastor. And then we walked him out, and he did not want to stay for the service. He did not want to get fed, as I say. He didn't want what God, the gospel, the church had to offer. And as we walked him out to his vehicle, I was watching him cycle. And so I wanted to make sure he got off campus safely without engaging other people, because he would try. And they would be looking at him, and I'd say, "So where did you park?" And I got him steered back out because he was resistant to the gospel. We tried to plant some seeds. We got him to the vehicle. And then I had an earpiece in, and so I might have faked a radio call. You're law enforcement. You might have had to do that to get away from somebody. So we got him to the vehicle, and then he started to go down the trail again. I said, "Oh, I apologize. I have got to go." And I put my finger up almost to my ear. He's like, "Okay." And as we kind of moved away, he drove out of the parking lot and went on somewhere else. And it ended well. I want to throw that back to you because I'd love some thoughts on that. But trying to do everything we do in love to bring that all the way back around, because I know that went about 5 directions. We will never know how many times we de-escalated something, or just our smile prevented something.
Exactly right. And I have people, I just saw recently a knucklehead making a comment that this person made the comment that there's no evidence that having a gun in the house is going to prevent a crime. All it does is that it's going to increase the likelihood you get hurt by your own gun. As you know, it's one of those big anti-gun arguments. A gun in the home is guaranteed to hurt you. And
I must be defective.
Right, because I'm fine too. And that's this hardcore mentality, in that this type of person will never realize how much good and how many self-defense situations. As a matter of fact, John Correa, on his latest video, shows an incident that, were it not captured by video and him showing it, the rest of the world wouldn't know. An effective use of a handgun that prevented a situation from going off the deep end. So this type of person. So you're absolutely right. We will never be able to quantify the number of incidences that were de-escalated successfully, and that's one of the things I try to pass on to churches and all that. Having that other person walk away is a win. You don't have to become first name basis. You don't have to lead them to Christ. You can just plant the seed and let someone else do what they have to do. Don't beat yourself up that, oh, I'm a failure, I'm on the greeting team, but I didn't lead them to Christ. No, you're just supposed to stand there, smile, and welcome them. Ministry minded. That's the scope of what you need to be. That's your lane. What they do with it is up to them and God. And you made a comment about some of the guys in the room and so on. I emphasize and strongly encourage people to recognize that you may not be part of that initial conversation, but your body language and facial expression could set a situation off. And I just had, coincidentally, this same personal experience. I'm so aware of it in other people, but I witnessed it and experienced it myself. This past Saturday, while we were right after end of training, I asked a group of people if anyone, I had already had a couple of people volunteer to make some statements on video, right? Everything is social media driven. So it's great when you can get someone's comments on video. And so I walked up this other group and I was asking them, hey, is anyone here willing to say a few words on video? And they all kind of looked at each other, and one lady in the back kind of rolled her eyes, and I keyed in on it. And I started laughing, and I called her out, and I said, "Oh, well, so-and-so just rolled her eyes." And, everyone's like, oh, and she starts laughing. A wonderful lady. She's just not into being videotaped, right? I get it.
Yes.
But what if the circumstances were different and I'm upset about something and I see this person roll their eyes? It's dismissive, it's disrespectful, and you could see where that could really trigger someone. So I tell people, just because you're not part of this interaction between your partner and someone else, they've got everything control and you're standing back, I promise you there's a high probability they'll probably notice you smirk or roll your eyes and they will go off. Because I've had it happen as a police officer. I've had students raise their hands and say, you know what, I just had that. One group training with a financial organization, she said, you know what, that happened to me. I was there was a little going on at the counter. I was about 15 feet away and I'm listening to them. It was so silly. And I finally just kind of rolled my eyes and they went off because someone noticed me, and it really went off the rails. And so if you are on the perimeter, make sure you maintain control of your facial expression and your body language also. You may not be directly involved with the person who's agitated and stressed, but you are involved. You're part of that perimeter, and they've already sensed you. And okay, which is why, again, because they've sensed you, it's critical that we don't just create this looming over, this ganging up effect with 5 or 6 people in the same room. I encourage you to avoid that, because you're finding yourself bunched up in an enclosed environment. Not necessarily a good situation. You've got your pastor. I'm just using that as an example because I don't know the size of the room you're in or stuff like that, but I'm always encouraging people in my scenarios, don't always feel like you all have to go rush into the room. One person at the door to let other people coming, oh, we're talking to someone in here. If you could just please give us a moment. So you've got crowd control. You're still close enough to maintain a visual on your partner and hear what's going on and react and respond if you have to, but you're not giving the other person the impression that you're all ganging up on them. So don't everyone just go rushing into an enclosed environment that you're most likely not trained to fight in, not equipped to fight in, and so on, right? So my training seminars is so much more than just a lecture presentation and don't say this. And I mean, because especially with my team, because my team and I have a combined like 140 years of actual street experience, and we're passing on these little nuggets. So much. And so when people go through my roughly 2-hour lecture presentation, they get an additional 2 hours from the individual comments and lessons from the other instructors that they go through, and anyway, there's so much more to it, and it's so critical that you maintain control of yourself. You just be aware of how you react and respond to in a stressful situation, even if you're not actually the person in contact with the person.
Well, and so there's so many gold nuggets here. If you guys are playing the home game, as I like to say, if you're listening to this or watching this later, what you were just talking about, your facial expression and not escalating something on the sidelines, I've seen it beside the badge as a chaplain. You've seen it from behind the badge. you got that guy that shows up that he was conditioning himself for, it's a physical domestic, or this is a gang violence area. I'm going to get in a fight. I'm going to get in a fight. I'm going to get in a fight. If you come up with that mindset and that mentality, or you bow up, all of your body language is, you're literally telling the other person your intent, whether you mean to or not. And I was talking to a guy that it was rather braggadociously telling me about protecting a celebrity one time. And a guy came up very aggressively wanting to tell this Christian celebrity why he was theologically wrong, which I know that Christian celebrity, and I doubt they were, but he said, we stepped in and we folded our arms, and we were ripped, and we just had muscle sticking out everywhere. We folded our arms and we kind of flexed on him and gave him a hard look. And I'm thinking, I'm going to go two directions with this and come back. One, don't flex in a moment. You're planting yourself from a defensive tactic standpoint. And I'm not Kung Fu Panda, but don't flex and don't lock yourself into something. Keep your hands, be as water, and
Exactly.
so keep yourself relaxed, and your body can tell your brain things subconsciously by what you're doing posture wise. We've proven that if you smile, it releases endorphins in the brain.
Yep.
So your smile can actually affect you. So don't lock yourself into a position. And folding your arms is a terrible defensive tactic. You open your abdomen, you open your face and your groin, your knees, whatever. And if your arms are folded, your legs are probably locked. So now you are a statue. Well, then, so take defensive tactics and throw that to the side. What are you telegraphing? Because if I walk into an environment and I look and there's two bouncers standing in front of me, and that's the way they're presenting themselves, that's a wall. And so there's no empathy. And of course, this is your bailiwick, but I want to throw this out there. You have no empathy. You probably got a hard expression, and your attitude is Hulk smash. I'm here to kick butt and chew bubble gum, and I happen to be out of bubble gum. And I've seen people do that in situations where, and I want to bring this back to something you kind of made me think about, that you taught me, is be willing to let somebody else tag in and let them take over. So I'd love for you to talk about posturing and then go that way.
Let me just comment that I'm sad that these guys, in my opinion, just based on what you told me, I wasn't there, but they did not sound like a good representative of this Christian celebrity, because they did not come across ministry minded, and yeah, the whole body language and stuff like that. Because we could have handled that with a smile. Hey, sir, how you doing? Look, I don't know, he or she's kind of busy right now, but blah 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 blah. So you've got to get your pride and ego out of it. I believe that's the direction we were going here. You got to be able to let someone tap in, because the moment, and it's very easy as human beings to suddenly get sucked down this rabbit hole, and you just I need to convince you that you're wrong, that my point is right. And it's easy to get sucked into that, especially if you're in a position of authority, security, police, cop, doctor, or parent. If you're in a position of authority and you feel you're being disrespected and ignored, I need to let you know I'm in charge here. You've got to get your pride and ego out of it. And this is why teamwork is critical, and why I emphasize it in my training seminars. Come up with some code words or something where you can let someone know, hey, I'm ready to tap in and give you a break, man. And this is where you need the discipline, the self-awareness to say, okay, back away, instead of turning around and saying these famous words, I've got this. Literally famous last words. I've got this.
Over here, you got punched.
Right. You've got to be able to work as a team that way. And so often, just changing the tone of voice and a different person saying exactly the same things you were saying or whatever, it just resonates with someone differently. And I've been in situations where an officer is struggling with connecting with someone, not because they were doing anything wrong. They just weren't connecting for whatever reason. And I would come in and I would just ask a bystander, hey, why is everyone so mad? What's going on? And all of a sudden they would start talking to me, because I'm not acting all crazy like the other officer who's getting frustrated and impatient with whatever the situation's going on. Create that distraction if necessary, to get the attention on yourself, so that you take over the conversation, to give your partner an opportunity to step back and take a deep breath and collect themselves. There were many, many times I had people who don't want to talk to me because I'm the one arresting them or impounding the car or whatever. that's okay. I let someone else do the talking. There's other things I could be doing, the paperwork, talking to someone else. I don't need to be the one to talk to you.
Mhm.
Um, there was one other point I was going to make. But anyway, yeah, you've got to be able to let people tap in. You've got to be able to work together as a team. Because again, the longer you're in a situation by yourself, the higher the probability you're going to end up saying or doing something that escalates it. Because you're going to get offended. You're going to get frustrated. You're going to get impatient.
Yes.
And you know, I create these scenarios so that people practice, you know, jumping in and out. And then I tell my instructors, if you see someone hogging the attention, disengage and start yelling at their partner. You know, spread it around. See if they're able to swap positions on their own.
Nice.
I was in a scenario, in a situation where this lady and I were screaming at each other's faces. I mean, I'm talking screaming at each other's faces, and I knew immediately she's not going to de-escalate me. So let me see what her partner does. So I turned around and start yelling at her partner. And this lady stepped between us and looked at her friend or her partner and said, "I got this. I'm going to talk to him." Oh, Lord have mercy. Well, I stopped the scenario because it was going nowhere. And I
Yes.
asked her, I said, "Why did you stay engaged with me? I even gave you an out. I voluntarily went to your partner. Why would you stay engaged with me? We clearly were not connecting, because
Yes.
if you cannot connect with someone, you're not likely to de-escalate the situation." And she said to me, and this is an example of someone in a position of authority who gets offended and all that, or feels like they have to be the one to fix it, resolve it. Okay. She goes, "Because I'm the senior executive in this establishment here, I just felt like I had to be the one to deal with this. And, you know, my partners, they're watching me." And I said, "Yeah, your partners are probably watching you and thinking in their head, just be quiet, and let someone take over." Um, but people in positions of authority will feel like they have to be the one to fix it, solve it, and all that. And so I tell classes, look, if you're in charge, delegate it.
Mm.
Don't let yourself get sucked into a situation. Trust me, I know, I get it. And there's actually several videos um, on YouTube of store clerks finding themselves in a position where they're, you know, as a store clerk, they're telling people, you know, "I'm sorry, we can't serve you because you're not wearing a mask," or whatever. And they get themselves all indignant that they go and assault the customer client, and then they get themselves in trouble. And all they had to do was just, "You know what, I'm just not serving you. It is what it is. I'm not serving you. Have a good day," and move on. But they let themselves get sucked into this situation, and they escalated it.
So I love what you just said. So there's a couple of things I want to pull out of that and really emphasize is how we see ourselves in that circumstance is going to actually lock us into lanes.
Yes.
And this is a super highway. This is a 6-lane interstate. And you've got the Indianapolis 500 lane way over here, and then you've got the slow lane way over here. And I think that can have a big impact on how we respond to situations, because instinctively I hate bullies.
Yep.
I just hate bullies. And so if we're not careful in an environment like that, I am way more dangerous backing you and protecting you than I am so if someone says to me, "I'm going to punch John in the face," I am way more likely to lose my temper than if they say, "I'm going to punch you in the face."
Mm.
And this is actually why torture oftentimes works on another person better than it works on us, because we're like, "Don't
Mhm.
torture that person,"
Mhm.
you know. And so she probably had, and I don't know what her mindset was, but she probably felt pride, which we all do. She
Mhm.
probably felt like, I'm responsible and I've got to take the heat. And she may have felt like, "Oh no, you don't get to bully my people. If you're an event, your wrath vented on me." And that was good for me to hear, because I have ended up in a couple of situations over the years where, as a boss who had employees, I used to have a computer store years ago. I dealt with a couple of volatile situations, and I'd love some critique on these. One of them I didn't handle as well, and the other one I think I handled pretty well. But I'd love your critique, and I love real world stuff, and you happen to teach real world stuff.
Mhm.
But I had a guy that he was really mouthy, he was really obnoxious, and I put up with him. And then he had an emergency. He had a restaurant he was trying to open, and he was literally a very volatile person, and would just almost like like Tourette's. I mean, I'm being funny, but
Right.
I'm
Right.
not.
No.
I mean, it just would just suddenly come out of him.
Mhm.
And so we're down there working, and I brought one of my guys in, and we're on both ends of a computer problem trying to fix it towards the middle. And he turns around and starts screaming at my employee. And I said, "Hey!" Boy, he turned and looked at me, and I said, "You can yell at me all I want, but don't you dare speak to my employees like that." And boy, he backed off real quick. And I felt at the time like I handled that well. Now, if he'd have been somebody of an asocial violence mind, I might have ended up in a knife fight. And then I had a situation where an individual, and I find this happens over and over and over again. I found out later he had a traumatic brain injury. And
Mhm.
so how he handles anger, and I've dealt with several people, and you've dealt with it a lot in and around law enforcement. We're just medically starting to understand what really happens in the brain with a TBI. So I'm in a meeting. It's worth thousands of dollars to me. My phone's blowing up. It's my store, and I'm like, "I told you not to interrupt me. I'm in a meeting." And this doctor looks at me and says, "Handle what's going on. I'm going to step out and take care of something. I'll be back in 10 minutes." He was very relaxed and very chill about it. So I stepped outside and I'm like, "What?" And they're like, "We've got this guy. He's on the phone. He dropped off his computer. We told him it would be a 3-day wait. This was when everybody else was a week. We were really high speed." And he's like, you're gonna fix my computer, or I'm gonna drag you outside and curb stomp you, and I'm gonna leave you in a puddle." And so he's threatened physical violence. And I got both employees that were there on the phone separately. So I was like, "Okay, you tell me your story. Okay, now you go get him. You now you hand it off to me." So I called this guy, and I'm like, "I've dealt with you several times. I don't understand. And this is inner monologue. Like, I've dealt with you several times. Why are you acting like this?" And I called him up, and he said, "Hey," he said, "your employees told me that if I come down there, they're going to drag me outside and beat me, into a pulp." And he used the exact same verbiage that they had said he had said towards them. And I knew who was lying. And so I had a much better gentle answer turneth away wrath this second time. And I said, "Well, listen," I said, there's a couple ways we can take this." And he said, "Okay." And so I was able to remain dead calm. Well, we weren't face to face. I had prayed before I went into it. I just thought about that. I had had time to think about responses. And I'm like, how do
Mhm.
I handle this and de escalate this without even knowing? Because this was over a decade ago, without
Mhm.
even knowing that I was de escalating. How do I diffuse this? Would have been my mindset. And so I'm on the phone with him, and he tells me all this. And I said, well, what's really interesting to me is you're telling me you've never threatened anyone in your life. And the verbiage you just used that they supposedly said towards you is exactly what they said you said towards them. "Well, if you don't believe me, I'm going to come down there and drag you outside and beat you up to a pulp and leave you bleeding in the parking lot." And I said, "See, that's weird, because that's exactly what they said you said." And I said, "So there's two ways we can handle this." I said, "I tell you what," I said, "you can let us fix your computer." So first I said, "I tell you what, you can come down here." I said, "Our local police department will meet you at the door, and for your protection, they will walk you in. You can get your property, and you can take your computer back out." And I said, "And you can go somewhere else with our blessing. You don't owe us anything. Your computer's only been with us a few hours. We haven't even had a chance to get started on it." I said, "So we can handle this in a way you don't owe anything. Go with God." And I didn't say that way. I didn't say that. I said, "Or," and he goes, "Or," and I said,
Mhm.
"Well, if you want to come down and you want to try to be violent," I said, "we will." And I was being a little bit of a smart aleck, but I was trying to get some humor injected in this in a good way, and it did work. Which humor in a volatile situation is a
Yes.
tightrope you got to walk.
Yes.
And I said, you can, if you want to come down here and try to be violent," I said, "we will lock the front doors and pop popcorn and watch local PD dribble you off the side of your vehicle." And he got really quiet, and he goes, "I think I like option one." And I
Mhm.
said, "Okay." And so it totally de-escalated it, because I told him, I said, "You will not harm my employees." And I said, if you attack my employees, I will be pressing charges. They will be pressing charges. We will come after you criminally, um, you will be trespassed, and we'll never work with you again." And I said, "I would just so much rather that we just decided this isn't going to work, and you're going to go your way and I'm going to go mine." And so I'd love your critique on that. But to me, those are a couple of real world scenarios.
The one of I want to emphasize and how great it was that you gave the guy the option to just come grab your laptop and go away. I know of so many businesses or organizations who feel like they just want to kowtow or just completely I don't want to lose your business. You know, I don't want you acting this way, but I don't want to lose your business. And I'm sorry. My attitude is I don't need your business. If you're going to treat me and my people this way, go somewhere else. And I've suggested that to some corporations that I've dealt with where they've talked about some chronic problems. And to me, on the outside looking in, I'm like, tell them to go away. Just, we're done with you. But whatever. Well done in giving this guy options. One of the things that is very, very tricky is standing up for your employees. I have a video of a situation in Indiana at a McDonald's. Manager, good people, meaning well, but she ended up slapping a customer and it just absolutely went off the deep end. And God bless the manager for standing up to her personnel, but she basically escalated the situation to the point where she felt like she had to slap this other person, and it just did not go well. You've got to be able to stand up for your people, because your people, their morale hinges greatly on whether or not they see their leader stand up for them.
Amen.
And so right off the bat, you've got that. The snapping at the other person, and it worked out, but you're absolutely right. When you're snapping at this guy, said, hey, you can talk to me that way all you want, but you're not going to talk to my customers. And that's another example of this guy was going to continue to be a knucklehead. So, you know what, we're done here. Or you know, when we're done here, we are done. I don't need to work with you. It worked out in your case, and this is where it's so critical to establish a relationship with people, customers, clients, because if you're smart about it, you'll have an idea to gauge how you can react and respond to someone, knowing that, okay, I can get this far to let them know they need to modify their behavior without, permanently ruining a business relationship. I'm not saying we need to discard everyone all the time, but we need to let people understand there are boundaries. We are human beings, and I really, in the end, don't need your money that bad. I mean, I want to have a working relationship with you, and I know you're having a bad day, but you can't overreact. You can't treat me and my customers this way. This is why I also tell people in all my classes, there's not a single thing another person is going through that you have not experienced and gone through yourself in some way. You may have better coping skills, you may have a better support system, you may have God. But we have all dealt with bills, health, kids, family, work, you name it. We have absolutely been there. If you cannot and do not connect with someone at that level, you are not likely to be able to successfully de-escalate that situation. And that's why it's important. Like you said, you recognize this guy had brain injuries. I don't know at what point you knew about that, but understanding things like that helps you gauge how you react and respond to them. You can show more grace, but again, I still don't need you talking to me and my employees this way. I mean, I'm willing to work with you, but it gives you a longer fuse, and so that's why it's critical to establish a connection with, and it boils down to relationship and ministry minded. Ministry minded doesn't necessarily have to be at church. If you are a God-fearing Christian, well, doggone it, ministry-minded is the moment you wake up, because you are going to be an example to everyone, your neighbors, your family, co-workers, the people you meet at the gas station, and so on. Ministry-minded. You have to live it. You don't have to be quoting scripture and holding a banner. You just be it. And you can let someone know firmly, love you, brother, but you're not going to have you talking to us this way. It's just not right. Both situations worked out very well. I would never say, hey, that is absolutely wrong. Why? Because you did go home safe. You did go home in one piece. And this is an example of where one of our scenarios, if that was a scenario we went through, the critique phase would be, hey, you know what? This worked out, but just in the future, just be careful about how you snap at someone and so on. It's just one of those takeaway moments where you kind of war game in your head later. Okay, that worked out, but maybe I wanted to be careful with my tone of voice or the things I say. And that's how we learn from life experience. The problem can be you developing the belief that if I talk to everyone this way, that's how I'm going to de-escalate it. And that is not correct, because every situation is very, very different. And I've run into people like that in our scenarios. I had one person yelling and screaming right off the bat, a church scenario. My instructor told me later, yeah, this is funny but not funny. I had to end the scenario, and I asked the guy, I said, sir, what made you believe that in this church type scenario that coming in here yelling at me is a course of action? And the gentleman said, well, in my experience, I have found that if I mirror someone's behavior, they will see how they're behaving and they'll stop. And he was very sincere about that. So basically, if you and I were in an argument and you're yelling at me, that belief system is, well, I'm going to yell back at Paul. He'll see that he's acting obnoxiously and he'll stop. Yeah, exactly. But good people meaning well, but don't realize they're just their line of thinking is wrong, and so on. And so
This has been the Let's Talk About Church Safety and Security podcast. We hope this blessed you, and we encourage you to like and share this episode with your ministry team.